So one of the things, as I talked about first, that we're going to be doing is really working on you. It sounds like you're already on social media, but at the end of our conference today, at the end of this workshop, you're actually all going to be social media educators. We're going to walk you through the process of creating your own account and actually your own brand. So as Dr. Narvey is going to be teaching all about social media, I want you to start thinking about what would be if you were creating your own social media brand where you're going to educate. What would be your account name? What will be your brand name? Because that's very important. A lot of us, when we have our own individual personal social media, we call ourselves Dr. Ford, Prem Ford, Prem Ford number one, whatever it is. But that's what you want when you're creating a brand, is something that people can identify, something that's very catchy, something like NICU Musings. It tells you that it's a person who is involved in the NICU, and musings is to observe, to watch, to gander. And so you immediately know by that account brand name that it's related to a neonatologist in the neonatal ICU, and that there's going to be images or pictures or videos that are going to be shown. My brand name is the NICU Doc. Again, it is telling folks that I am a doctor who happens to work in the NICU. So when you're thinking, as you're listening to Dr. Narvey talk, I want you to start thinking in your mind, what would be your brand name? Because later we're going to ask you, you might be picked out. No, we'll volunteer. If anybody would like to think about what would their brand name be, and we can listen to all kinds of brand names and have a little fun with that. Okay, Dr. Narvi, now it's all yours.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing. You might, because there was a show of hands here, Prem, about half the room admitted, some of you may have not admitted, but half of the room admitted that they already have social media accounts. So what I would say to you is think about, after you hear this talk, maybe you want to continue with that account. Maybe you're inspired to say, I should be on a different account. And so you might want to start something up fresh. Regardless, nobody's going to be put on the spot. This isn't like you were in university and somebody points at you and says, okay, you, what's your answer? Okay. So the title, what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through about 25 or so slides that really is meant to just whet the appetite. It's meant to get you into the idea of why would one do this and what do you have to think about? What are some pitfalls? And I'm going to show you some personal experiences that did not go so well for me because it's important that people realize, as much as we do this because we want to educate, we want to excite people about neonatology. You need to think about who's your audience and how that can be, who you might impact, right? So the title of the talk, and it's just 20 minutes or 25 minutes, social media can be awesome, but use it wisely and know how to protect yourself. And as I say that, I realize there are different laws, there's different societal expectations, depending on where, we might give a talk like this, to a North American audience, a South American audience, in the Gulf. And so take what I say with a grain of salt at times and apply your own institutions requirements or cultural requirements, of course, into what you wind up doing. So where can you find me? Yeah, thank you for the introduction. There's I would say I first got into social media in 2015. February of 2015 is when I began the journey. I began with a Facebook page. I started with All Things Neonatal, the blog, and I think I've written about 400 or so blog posts since that time. Admittedly, I have to say I've slowed down on that, and there's reasons for it. One of them having been distribution. Much more difficult to distribute blog posts as far as reach, although I'm always shocked by how many people seem to know of the blog, even though when I would write, I would see sometimes I only get a few hundred reads of something. At least that's the data I get. But judging by the nods even around the room, I think it's probably more than that. YouTube, I have a very, very tiny presence, but I put the link up there anyway. My main sources of sharing right now are TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find me there at NICU Musings, and then there's the blog. Just a second, we'll move on. So my colleague is younger and more flashy than I am. That was my slide. This is his slide. Prem, do you want to say a few words about?
Yes, hi. I started in social media in 2020, so a little bit, 5 years after my colleague here. And so I initially started actually with YouTube. So I started creating some videos on YouTube, and it's basically just educational videos talking about different things like bronchopulmonary dysplasia. And it's really catered a lot to the families and healthcare workers, just trying to make the terms a little bit more basic for folks to actually understand some of the complexities of these neonatal diseases. So once I started doing that, I started getting now into Instagram. And so now I would say Instagram is my major platform. So you can see me right there. Both of them are the NICU doc. So if you search the NICU doc on YouTube or Instagram, you will find me there. I'm also recently entered the world of TikTok, but I'm tiny compared to this big guy right here. And then actually I've written a couple of children's books looking at the kids in the NICU and following adventures. We recently published a one Christmas story, and it's actually very nice because it's done with a NICU parent who actually had a 27-weeker in the NICU. So it's a nice perspective. It's got a little comedy from both sides. So, always keeping ourselves busy. People always ask how we have time to do this. I have no idea. But when you're passionate about something, you do it. And that's, you find the time, and that's how we do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and what I think is great, of course I'm biased, but as Prem said, when you look at this slide, I'm just going to draw your attention. It's very tiny here. I don't mean the influence is tiny, but that on the letters here, it's 22,400 followers, which I have to say for Instagram is actually a very big presence for a medical site. So, if you want to learn about Instagram, this is the man to talk to. I have a much smaller presence on Instagram, but it's nice that we pair off each other and we learn different strategies for the different platforms. So, yeah, I don't think it's working. Yeah. So one of the the objectives, why are we here? So the first question that I think people want to know is, why do this at all? Okay, so as Prem alluded to, it does take time. It takes time away from other things. So why might you want to do it? The next thing that we're going to tackle is, how do you build an audience? Because that's an important thing, is if you're going to do the work, you want to know that the people are seeing what you're putting out. We're going to discuss, and this is very important, how to be careful on social media. And then I'm going to give you some very concrete examples. And in the last slide, you might see somebody how to be careful and what not to do. Now, when I say I'm going to show you a person, I don't mean that I shouldn't show him. I have permission to show him, but you'll soon see, you might know him. So motivation. So why do this at all? So what I'm showing you here is this is a psychological battery of tests that I went through, not because I have psychological issues, but because as part of a initiative that was done when I was in Alberta, my then section head wanted us to go through these psychological tests to determine a little bit about who we were as a group. So this is called Insights, and I took this in May 2013, 2 years before I got into social media. And I could spend about a day talking about this because it's fascinating stuff, but this is my personality profile. Now, Yaya knows who I am, and when I describe some of these things, he might say, yeah, no, I think that fits. So basically, I had to answer about 50 questions. And they were stuff like, you're at a party and somebody was walking up to you. Do you walk into the corner and avoid them, avert your eyes? Are you the one who sticks your hand out and shakes? Those sorts of things. And there are 4 main types, okay? So the red are the directors. So when you think about the aggressive boss, right, who's shaking the finger all the time, do this, do this, do this, that's a pure red person. The yellow people and the greens are more of the feelings, okay? They're more, let's do what feels good, right? Like if the right thing to do means that a lot of people are going to be upset, shouldn't do it, right? So that's the yellow. Then the blue and the green. Now the yellows are the creative people. Okay. The blues are people like my colleague here in some ways. You've got a lot of blue. Blues would be the analytical people, data-driven research. Okay, people who can sit poring over data. Those are the blues. Okay, so I was described overall as I like to. Just a second. I was described as investigative, interested, and inventive. I'm friendly and sociable. Many of you haven't met me yet, but I do like to think that I'm friendly and sociable. I see, and these are based on my psychological profile. This is what they said about me. I see innovation as a necessity, and that is absolutely true. You know, when Yaya, you were doing the non-invasive work in Winnipeg and starting that workout, I mean, I was entirely supportive of it because I thought it was cool. I thought it was neat. It was innovative, and we should be doing that. And I'm creative and future-oriented visionary. So I like to think as a section head or division head in Winnipeg, or through the work with the Canadian Pediatric Society, that I do like to think about how can we move things forward all the time? How do we make things better? Okay. And so, you know, I think when I think about social media, these are some of the reasons why I like social media. One of the things that we're supposed to do as clinicians is we're supposed to keep up with the literature. Now, I won't embarrass people, but if I asked for a show of hands and I said, how many of you read papers every week? You know, there might be some of you. Okay, well, he's very good. Yes, so you read papers every week. But there's a lot of people now that don't have the time, right? They're too busy with other things. They've got family. Family's important. They've got pets. They've got family. They've got travel. They've got coming to conferences, right? So how do you fit it in? Well, if you're on social media and you're an educator, you are obliged to read this stuff. It drives you to read this stuff. So I'm going to say one of the secrets is I was very selfish. I wanted to learn. And so I figured that's by posting, I better be able to defend myself if I give an opinion. So I have to read the paper. Okay. I really believe give and you shall receive. Sounds very biblical, but it's very true. Okay. We're here today in part because I kept putting stuff out there. And this man right here reaches out to me and he says, hey, you and I are in the same, doing the same sort of thing. We should collaborate. Okay. So I learn from him. He learns from me. And I get people sending me literature, papers, and saying, oh, we're doing this research. You should write about it, or you should. And we're going to talk about that because that's interesting too. Catharsis. So catharsis is that sense of relief you get when, you know, through expression of emotion. So actually, the very first thing I ever did was, for those of you who have heard of the Canadian Neonatal Network, it's a big organization like the Vermont-Oxford Network in the US that publishes lots and lots of information based on data from Canada. And they published a paper, and I thought the paper was terrible. I read the paper and I thought, this is awful. And so I wrote a blog post. That was the very first blog post I wrote about it, very strong opinion. And that's how I got into it. And I felt so good as the thoughts hit the page or the digital page. So that's one reason. And making connections, like being here. I wouldn't be here. Well, maybe I have 2 more lectures to give, but I wouldn't be here primarily if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, we were asked, what can we do? And we said, well, we can talk about social media. And that was hopefully interesting. Now, far be it from me to compare myself to the Dalai Lama, but the Dalai Lama once said this quote, which I like: the root of happiness is altruism, the wish to be of service to others. And that is my personality. I like to help. And so I think that's one reason. Now, I was once, actually, I shouldn't name the name because this is being broadcast. I was going to tell you who said this. It wasn't flattering. But someone once said to me, they stopped me in the hallway. I was walking through the hallways of the hospital, and this person walks right up to me and says, how can you do this? This is a colleague. How can you? And I said, do what? I said, I heard and I've seen you're posting on social media. She goes, you're a doctor. And I said, yes. She says, but more than that, you're the section head of neonatology. This is embarrassing. You are embarrassing the department. That's what they said to me in the hallway. And you know what I could have gotten angry, and I could have been argumentative, but you know what I said? Tell me more. That was a member in Winnipeg, yeah. And they said, I said, tell me more. What is embarrassing? What exactly is your concern? And I followed that up with, have you looked at what I'm doing? Have you actually gone? And they said, well, I don't have Twitter and I don't have Facebook. And I said, I think you need to go and see what I'm doing. Okay. So I call this the new academic triple threat. You would know. But because we're broadcast, I don't want to say. But in any event, so the new academic triple threat, meaning that, when you think about it, I haven't counted, but let's say there's 30 people in this audience right now. But I don't know how many online. I can reach so many people. I could do grand rounds at a hospital and reach, 100 people. I could do a conference at a big conference, the Pediatric Academic Society, and maybe have a hall of 300 people. But when I do this, it just goes everywhere, right? And you'll soon see, because I have an example of things that can get into the millions. Recorded and posted. So this is where I think you guys will find this very interesting. One of the reasons that I think social media is so important as a vehicle to promote education and research is there are neonatologists, not in this room, but there are neonatologists who have written to me before, and they've said, would you mind writing a blog post about this paper I wrote, right? Because as I'm going to show you, this is a concrete example of how powerful social media can be. Because at some point, the inquisitive side of me got involved, and I started to say, what is actually happening when I write things? Like, is this a benefit to the researchers out there? So being in Canada, I thought this would be a good thing to promote Canadians. And so I wrote, this was very near and dear to my heart, a paper I saw that said 24-hour in-house neonatologist coverage out of Calgary, Alberta. And I thought, oh no, if this says we should all be in-house, I don't want to be in-house, because we don't. But this was by Abbe Loda, who some of you may know. He's published an extensive amount. And so I said to Abbe, I need a favor from you. I said, can you write to the publisher and get some data? I'm going to show you the data. The data was, he published this in, I think, May of 2017. And you can see, this is from the publisher, how many times his article had, these are abstracts, abstract views, which are always going to be higher than, the full article. But in a span from May till October, he had 304 abstract views. He had 67 full downloads. So then, this was day one. I wrote a paper about it. I had 1,881 blog clicks, meaning that in one day, I had roughly, 60 times the amount that he had in those many months. And this was the actual blog post. And this is data that you get. This was off of Facebook, but you could see, for those of you that once you get into this, you're very interested in data, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, as we'll show you, have all of this data that you can get, which you could even do research on. Okay, so you could see how many people click, how many people like, dislike, all of that stuff. You also can get data about where they're from. So you can find out, I showed Prem last night, that his friends in the United States were very kind to me in a recent post. Okay, the reason I'm including this is because this was back in about 2018. I was at a low, okay? I'd been doing this, it was a lot of work. I spend about a half hour a day on social media, but I was starting to get to the point where I felt like, why am I doing this? It's a lot of work, I'm not paid for it. Not that that's why one would do it, but I thought, I've got other things that I've got to do. And then, I received this email from a teacher, and I love this because this is what got me back and inspired me to keep going. So what this says, for those of you who can't read it, is this was an email from Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was a teacher of a grade 7 student, and he wrote, Dr. Narvey, I'm a teacher in Little Rock, Arkansas. For the past 2 weeks, I've had my students study various careers, culminating in an email interview in which they ask a professional to describe their career in a more personal way. Here's the email of one student who studied your career. This is a 12 or 13-year-old boy who found me on the internet and has been reading about my career. Okay, so I thought that was pretty neat. So this is just some quote. We went back and forth for a while, although because of legality, Prem, you'll be happy to know I was not allowed to communicate directly with the student. It had to be through the teacher. But he wrote, I'm a 7th grade student doing a research career project. I chose becoming a neonatologist. I have already done some research about this, but now I want a firsthand look at the job. I am so interested in the job for many reasons. I have always found the medical field extremely interesting. So when many of my cousins were born prematurely and had to be taken to the NICU, I decided to learn more about becoming a neonatologist. I love caring for babies, and I feel this job helps families across America. This, and I'm not being dramatic, just about brought me to tears. I don't want to be too dramatic. I didn't cry, but I got, you know, the tear you get on your on the lid. I started to get a little bit as I thought, wow. I had been so focused that I was helping people like you. I hadn't even considered for a moment that end users include parents, children, teenagers, students in high school and university. And so this inspired me to keep going, and I never looked back. So the last part of the talk, we're going to get into how to build an audience. So for those of you who either are on social media or you're thinking about getting into social media, of course, there's different platforms. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, we've got TikTok. When Elon Musk, I'm sure you heard about what was going on, was blowing up with Twitter, and everybody was jumping to Mastodon. That was the thing that was going to take over. It was Mastodon, although I don't think people are talking much about that anymore. So these are the three main ones. And so a couple messages. You can go online right now and you can Google, and this is really important if you want to have reach. There are people who do the work for you and can tell you in, you know, UAE, in Saudi, in Oman, or Turkey, or North America, what are the best times to post? Okay, because you can put things out there, but if there's nobody out there, if there's only 10% of people who would see your content are active, let's say at 2 in the morning, don't post at 2 in the morning. So I actually have almost memorized this grid here. This is for North America. And so I tend to always post on any given day. You'll see me posting around when the traffic is going to be highest, because that's how you get the distribution. The other thing is all of these platforms have something in common. They have algorithms that are working behind the scenes, okay, that determine who's going to see your content. And depending on the algorithm that day or things that are competing for attention on the service, like we were just talking about this last night, you might have something that you think is a home run. That's a North American expression, meaning baseball, that you home run. It's a fantastic post and you get very few views and you say, geez, what's wrong with the post? Well, it may be there's absolutely nothing wrong with the post, but you just posted it on a day when there was too much competition. So post it again. There's software that can take off the watermark that shows Instagram or TikTok, and then you can repost it as if you never posted it before. And I do that. I'll sometimes I'll have something that I say, this should have been an incredible post, and it just doesn't go. And I post it. First time I get 10,000 views. The next time on a different day, it's 500,000 views. So don't. And the other thing is, especially with TikTok, I can't speak to Instagram. There's an expression in TikTok called the slow burn. Okay, that you might post something and you check after 5 hours and it's got much lower views than you're used to. And you're going to be tempted to delete it. Okay, so, well, this is embarrassing. I don't want to have this out there. It performs so poorly. But the next day, for whatever reason, it just takes off. Okay, so don't delete your stuff unless you think there's something on there that should not be on there, like it's offensive or something. So another way to grow an audience is ask for people to get involved. So this is not necessarily a post that I had a huge number of hits on. I actually don't remember what I had. This is on TikTok, but I love that picture of that baby who looks absolutely annoyed. And so I said, caption this, meaning in the comments, people can write something funny. And the way these algorithms work, at least for TikTok, which I've read the most about, because I've had the most success there, comments really drive the viewing. Okay, you've got people who are viewing your stuff because they follow you, but then there's something called a For You page. The For You page, and I'm sure Instagram has something similar. The For You page means stuff that TikTok thinks or Instagram thinks you're going to want to see. The more people comment, the more it gets pushed out there. Okay, so when you say, it's a little trick, when you say caption this, or, you know, what do you think? You give a comment and say, do you agree? You know, or a poll, you know, agree or disagree, or true or false, right? As people start commenting, your views go up. The other thing that I've been told, and I really believe this, is stay in your lane. Okay, meaning if you have a certain way of posting videos, and you'll see that if you ever follow me on TikTok, my videos almost always look the same. Because when people are scrolling through, and I'm sure on your phones you all scroll through and you're looking, if you see something that always looks the same, you'll say, oh, that's Dr. Narvey. I know this one, right? As you're scrolling fast. The moment you start changing things all the time, people can't identify your brand. You're marketing yourself, okay? The other thing, at least at the beginning, comment on other people's posts because they want you to be engaged. So find people that you like, comment on their post, and they comment in you, and then they say, oh, okay, that's the NICU doc. I'm going to follow him, okay? Hashtags and tagging. So especially when you're starting out, you want to jump on trends, meaning if you look on Twitter, this is a screenshot from Twitter, not that I watched The Bachelor, but this is what, just on this day when I made the slide, you can look in Canada and you can say what's trending. So let's say there's something medical that's trending. Now, something recent, of course, that you would all relate to is the recent earthquake. So not to say that, you know, you would do it for profit or anything, but if you had something about pediatrics or neonatology related to the earthquake and you put the hashtag earthquake or Syria, Turkey earthquake, what the hashtag does, if you don't understand or don't know what it is, hashtags are a way of searching for content. So if I want to see everything out there that has to do with the Syria, Turkey earthquake, which is of course millions of posts, you can, in the search bar at the top of Twitter, just write hashtag Syria, Turkey earthquake. And then all these posts just start showing up about it. So if somebody's searching for that, your post is one of them that they'll see. So the other thing is there are what are called bots. Bots are automated software, basically, or programs that amplify your message. So in case you didn't know, on Twitter, for example, it's Neo Twitter, hashtag Neo Twitter. And what that does is, and I know the person, well, you know Alvaro, right? Poano? Yeah. So he's in Louisiana, I think, or he was. Yeah. Anyway, he created Neo Twitter. And what it does is every time you'll always see on my posts, I hashtag Neo Twitter, because what happens is everyone who follows that Neo Papers hashtag, or sorry, Neo Papers is the bot. Anytime you see Neo Twitter, it automatically gets shared to everyone who's following that. Same with Med Twitter, Cardio Twitter. There's all these bots that will push this stuff out. So use them. They're there. They're free. You may as well use them. And then, of course, I have a picture of my colleague here, because the other thing you can do is if you have somebody, let's say I'm on Instagram and I only have 7,500 followers. If he's got 22,500, if I tag him, so tag is the @ symbol. So if you go, you know, at the NICU doc, right? What happens is he's going to see my post because I put that tag on there. Now, a lot of times he'll ignore it. Okay. No, but if it's of no interest, he'll just ignore it. But if it's something that he says, oh yeah, that's really neat, he might share it. He might respond, and his followers see that he's active with that post, and they'll say, oh, who's this NICU Musings guy? So that's a strategy to get involved. Okay, now on to be careful. The University of Manitoba, where I work, published a set of guidelines. And these guidelines are great because they're guidelines for practice, because the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Manitoba has similar guidelines that they're working on for social media. And the Canadian Medical Protective Association, which is our insurance branch, they also have guidelines, but they're all very similar. And basically what they say is if you're going to be involved in social media, be accurate. So use facts. So as a physician, especially, you don't want to be tweeting about, you know, you heard that the person on The Bachelor slept with so-and-so and so. You know, that's not what you want to be doing. What you want to be doing is sharing research papers, comments on research papers. Be respectful. So don't put anyone down. Be transparent. They want to know that you identify yourself. Maintaining privacy and confidentiality. Obviously, we always say that. Add value. So that's the whole point of all this, isn't it? If you want to get into this, you want to be adding something. Why should somebody check what you're putting out there? It's because you're adding something, a comment or awareness. Use disclaimers. Opinions are my own. Copyright, that's important. So be very careful. And I'm going to give you some examples about what you share. I know one of our colleagues in Florida, he told me a story about how he shared something, a picture from the World Cup. Did you hear about this? Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, Ben. He shared a picture after, where the heck's he from? France. Yeah, when France lost the World Cup, he pictured, or he put a picture, I guess, when the French, what's his name? The big striker, Mbappe, when he tied it up or whatever. Yeah, he put a picture. He put a picture, and you know what happened? He got contacted, I think, by ESPN Sports because he took a photo of their TV, and they said, you need to take this down. That's ours. Yeah, so you got to be careful. Never thought that would happen. So content warnings. This is something to be very mindful of. As successful as TikTok has been, and I'm going to, again, share some real data with you very soon, TikTok is extremely, extremely sensitive about anything to do with child nudity. I have been suspended off TikTok several times for sharing things that I thought were so interesting. And this was one of them, actually. Because you clearly see the gluteal cleft of this baby with a newborn tail, they made me take it down. No, sorry, they took it down. I didn't even have a chance. They just said, content violation, you're banned for a day. You know, because, and I wrote them and I said, but wait a second. I said, this is a medical post. I'm a physician. You know, I wrote them and they said, it doesn't matter. It violates our safety. So anything that involves a minor, which for us, because it's pediatrics, you need to be careful. Similarly, Instagram will have a sensitive content warning. Actually, TikTok does as well. If it's something that they feel is just going to be, because remember, when we talk about audience, we don't know if it's a child. We don't know if it's an adult. They just want to be very careful. They don't scare people. Twitter evolution, we talked a little bit about. Anything goes these days on Twitter. I mean, you could post anything you want. There's really, as I understand, he disbanded the content moderators. So pretty much, and you've probably noticed if you're on Twitter, there's stuff out there, a lot of anti-vaccine stuff now that previously you wouldn't have seen that you now see. So the future of Twitter, I think, is a little uncertain. And the don'ts. Okay. Do not give in to temptation. You're going to think I'm very religious. I just realized I unintentionally have all these biblical quotes, but I didn't mean to. But remember, you're representing yourself as a professional. So I have here somebody, we have an expression in English, throwing grenades, okay? So on social media, the more dynamic, the more exciting, sensitive, sensational something you post, the more likely people are to look at it. So you need to resist if something you don't know the facts, but you hear a story and you just say, oh, I'm going to share this. Right? It's quite embarrassing when somebody says, oh, that was fraudulent. That was a terrible story. And then you look silly, right? So make sure that you have the facts. This is an example that reminds me. So you might be tempted to show this. Okay. So this is, you know, a picture of a baby with lesions, congenital herpes, or early onset herpes infection. If this was taken off of Google, by the way, I didn't realize this, that when you copy an image off of Google Images, because we all do it, right? For presentations, you want your Google Images, or sometimes, yeah, they're copyrighted. Okay, I don't know if most of them are copyrighted, so they're not free for sharing. But if you subscribe to something he's going to show you about called Canva, Canva is, they have all the content that you can share because they've licensed that content. So be very careful. There is, by the way, you can look at usage rights at the top menu of Google. If you look at tools, you can look at usage rights, and you can actually select out images that are licensed, that are free to use, as opposed to ones that are copyright restricted.
Taking your patient's picture,
Yeah.
sometimes put it on the Instagram or maybe on the
Yeah.
important to take the permission.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. If you're going to use images of your patients, I would advise you to get written consent. Written. Make sure it is written, not verbal. No, because what you have to understand is, let's say something bad happens, like the images are not well received, somebody identifies the family and is harassing them. Be very easy for the family to say, we didn't understand. You know, we didn't really give consent. But if you've got it in writing that you are free to use these images as you see fit for educational purposes, then I think you're fine. So I shared this story last night with Prem, actually. So the Canadian Pediatric Society in the start of the pandemic asked me for help because I had all the social media channels. They said, can you post information that will help Canadian physicians? And so one of the things was, how do we intubate safely? And so I asked from around Canada people to send me submissions of their process on video for intubating safely with proper equipment. And I was asked immediately to take down, in the interest of time, because I'm a little behind, I won't ask you the question, but I was asked to take it down. The reason I was asked to take it down by the university was because although I had permission, written permission, from the director of the video at the University of Manitoba, one of the people in the video complained and said, I didn't give permission for this to be shown outside of Winnipeg. This was staff. Yeah, it was staff. Said they were under the impression this was going to be used locally. Okay, so beware of that. If you're going to share videos, make sure that the people in the video, not just the person who made the video, have agreed that they can be shared.
So I would say only the part that when you don't identify them, but they are not identified.
If they're not identified, I think that's okay. If it's just somebody's hand, yeah. Even which?
The people they are not the video. Should write.
Oh, I see. The lesson I learned is if I was going to share a video of people, I would get their permission. And most of the time now we do that. So if we're shooting videos in our simulation center, everyone has to sign that everyone. Yeah. Does anyone recognize, well, Dr. Syed does. This is Dr. Seisha, Molly Seisha, a very famous Canadian neonatologist who's still working in some capacity. I wasn't sure if people would know the man on the right there. That's Assam Lashan, and he's from Egypt. In any event, he works in Winnipeg now. That's Shamala Dakshanamurti. And so this picture was the last day before we moved into our new neonatal intensive care. And somebody took this picture and sent it to me. And I thought, can I share this to social media? Now, there's a black box, interestingly, over these two people, because neither of them gave me consent to show their images, okay? But this image is a very unsafe image to share on social media. And the reason it's unsafe is because if you were to expand the picture, you could potentially see, this is a chart. This is an electronic patient record. So you could potentially expand and see somebody's name, date of birth, right? So you need to be careful. Lots of people you'll see, like if I was to come into one of your NICUs and you say, oh, can I take a picture with you, right? And we take our picture standing side by side. In the background, there's a patient list of names maybe. So be very mindful when you're doing that you don't reveal patient names. And with that, sorry, Prem, we went a little long, but